Mayo experience.
Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Experience.
To the Pat Mayo Experience live. We're going on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, and here on X, where I think a lot of people are watching it as well, talking about all the new latest legislation stuff that might be coming down the pike and just more industry stuff. So a bit insular today, but there's a new tax bill that's going through the Senate. We'll see if that ends up passing because, I don't know what's going on with any of this stuff. Just want to let you know, this show is presented by Underdog. You should all play on Underdog. You should sign up with code Mayo, helping me break this down to understand the ramifications of both pros and even casual players, be it in the betting space, poker space, and it seems like DFS may have been left out of this for the moment. I got Brian Hooper and Dan Bach on with me. And Brian, I want to go to you first because you're, Mr. Statehouse. You know the law, you know the lobbies. You're familiar with this. And we just had one more thing come out within an hour of this show. This is from, who is this? Bill Spiros. I don't know who that is, but apparently this is not as bad as it once seemed about 12 hours ago. So what do you make of what's going on, Brian?
So yeah, this is why it's always good to have the news drop before you go live, because it completely changes. This completely changes the way to look at this bill, which is still bad. It's still not a good thing, but at least for the professional players, the first interpretation we had on as Twitter lawyers was really bad. So especially for professional players, this makes it seem like, and I did put this in the chat GPT. So that is basically like the Supreme Court of interpretations. And it thinks this guy is right, and professional players will be exempt from this code change, but recreational players the code change will still apply to them. And maybe we should say what that change is. For those who don't know, who haven't been on Twitter in the last 24 hours, it's a change in the tax code for how you would count your gambling losses. Like in any sane world, if you spent $10 on a lottery scratch-off ticket or whatever, and you won exactly $10 back, you would be break even and you wouldn't owe any taxes. Under this new bill, it's your losses are counted only at 90%. So you would technically owe $1 in taxes. You'd have to pay taxes on $1 under this new law as a recreational bettor. And the scare was, before this new interpretation, which we're still not sure how it's going to play out here, was that for professional players or anyone who gambles for a decent amount, like the total amount wagered can really ramp up really quickly. If you're betting, $100 and you get 90 back, and then you bet $150 and you win 200, and then that adds up over time. All that would count if you're not a pro. And you would apply this new formula. So if you wagered $100,000 and got back $100,000, normally you'd be like, that's break even. I don't need to report any income. Under the new law, you would only be able to claim $90,000 on that, the $100,000 that you spent, your losses. And you would have to pay taxes on $10,000 in gambling income. And you correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but that's my interpretation of how everyone is reading this.
That's how it looked to me. And then I mean, it doesn't affect me. I'm in Canada. We play by a completely different set of rules here, where if you're not a professional gambler, then none of it is taxable. Whatever you win, you win. Whatever you lose, you lose. Seems like a pretty good system that in terms of that. But if you are a pro gambler, then obviously that's different. If that's what you put in to up here, the CRA, not the IRS, as your profession, that's what you would end up paying taxes on. So Dan, you see a lot of professional gamblers get into the content space, mainly because of that, I think.
Yeah, and the interesting thing on this too is normally we don't get a tax statement from the gambling companies unless you hit $600 in what, gross profit, I believe. Isn't that right, Brian?
Mm-hmm.
I know that's it for DFS. I think it's it for just sports betting in general. And from what you're saying here, it seems like no matter what you bet, you're going to be getting a tax document from the gambling entities themselves. Is that $600 limit off the table? Because it's seemingly, like you say, not relevant to this discussion.
I mean, I would think if you even occurred, if you got like what would the math be? But if the math now plays off that you had $600, but you still lost, but it's still 600 with this new calculation of 90, I would assume DraftKings would have to send that to you, and you owe money on the $600, even though you broke even or lost or won a little bit, depending on how the math works.
Right. Like, I don't know. This is very confusing. And I think it's actually potentially could affect a lot more people than what everybody else was thinking before when it was just related to the professionals. But I also am not certain that this is going to hold a lot of water when it's all said and done. You've been around this quite a bit, Brian, especially the legislative process. Things change quite a bit. And I just am trying to understand what the upside on even messing with this is. How much money are they really going to recoup from this? And at the end of the day, if somehow I have to pay more taxes than I actually won in the year, more in taxes than I actually won in the year, I don't even know how that's like constitutional. Like, I feel like this is going to end up in court one way or another if that is how this final interpretation ends up. So I wouldn't quite hit the panic button yet. It's not good. Obviously, they probably shouldn't mess with it at all. But I also think there's got to be some common sense at some point in time when you do the math and you say, okay, like, I broke even and now I lose money. That can't happen. And that very well could happen to, thousands and I don't know, maybe millions of people here potentially when you look at, how much, how many like average everyday bettors exist out here. And it adds up over the course of a year. Even if you're a low time bettor and you're betting $20-$30 on a same game parlay, you do enough of those, they add up. So am I concerned a little bit? Am I panicking? No.
Yeah. I mean that the saving grace here might be like the local casinos and the state lottery and the scratch off tickets, who are like, wait, what do we have to do now to comply with this ridiculous law? And they might push back to get this amended again. So who knows? The way it's written, it's bad no matter what, even if the new interpretation is right. So we don't want it at all in any shape or form. But yeah, I mean, like, if we have to put a line on this, as we probably should, being gamblers, I'm kind of leaning with you, like plus 300 or something. Like, it seemed a lot scarier yesterday. It's part of a very big bill, though. I don't know if you guys have heard.
Right.
So who knows?
Does this affect DFS players at all, Brian?
Oh yeah, Like, I mean, I've wagered like $15 million in a year or something in DFS, multiple times. So, like,
but is that covered under the sports betting law? Like, what would poker be considered under, or is that under the fantasy law?
The way I'm seeing it explained on Twitter is it would affect DFS as well. But maybe there's been some new language in there that wasn't shown, and it's DFS is carved out somehow. But from my understanding, it's just any gambling wagers and in like DFS and poker bros, especially. I mean, sports betting too, but I would guess poker and definitely DFS would be the highest grossing.
Let me jump in there for a second too. And first off, consult with a tax professional. Don't take our advice on any of this stuff. Okay. The one thing that I think we need to remember too is DFS, when you get your tax documents, you get a 1099 miscellaneous. When you get gambling winnings, you get a 1099G. So they are reported to the government separately. So I think that might, again, I'm not a pro in terms of, discussing this, but especially for your average person who is not looked at as, or does not define themselves as a professional gambler, maybe you can look at it differently, because that's looked at as other income, not gambling income. So not certain on it, but I think there's a chance that it could not affect DFS just because of the way that DFS is currently taxed compared to gambling. But again, not a tax professional.
Those were some of the interpretations that I saw too, Brick, that even Pizzola had put out a little bit earlier, that just how, like, if you're not a sports book and you're not regulated by sports book governing, what's the new one now? Kalishi, where you can bet on like Love Island winners. I mean, Profit X would probably fall into this too, that the exchanges aren't governed the same way that sports books are. Therefore, that the winnings from those sites would technically not fall underneath of this.
Yeah, in his thread, he just that thread was pretty funny, by the way, because it was an advertisement for one of his sponsors amongst this thread of the big time. I'm like, well played, Pizzola.
That is the real weave right there.
Yeah, that was a dance move in itself. It was the CTFC, I think, or something, overseas Kalshi Poly market. Eventually, they're suspended right now from the American market, but I have a feeling they might come back. I don't think
Poly market's suspended from the American market.
Yeah. I don't think any states. Definitely not here. Illinois has been pretty strict on that stuff, unfortunately, so far. So we'll see. Just the obvious full court press on gambling right now. I mean, Illinois, we had this ridiculous sports betting tax added a couple weeks ago. The Kalshi is probably going to see, so who knows what they're going to try to pull there. But New
Jersey just raised it too, just literally like a week ago. So
Jersey with another regressive one. California, I think, is looking at it. Even like the spots where you could say like, oh, things are looking good, which were the Wyoming and Massachusetts task force to look at why players are getting limited. Those turned out to really not be great for bettors either. So, they see this as gambling's a tax on stupid people. Like, that's how most of these legislators see it. Like, here's some extra money we could scrounge together for these gigantic budgets. So let's do it. I don't know. Dan was insinuating, I think, a little bit on this earlier. I have no idea like who's behind this. I could see like the old Patriot, the old Patriot Act, where they put the Black Friday poker legislation in, the UIGEA stuff. Bill First, I think, was the legislative response to that. He was like really religious and anti-gambling, and that was kind of the reason why we all assumed he was against this. So maybe on the Senate Finance Committee that like kind of pushed this through without a vote, this amendment, from my understanding, again, we don't take my word on any of this stuff. Maybe somebody on there is like just really anti-gambling.
Yeah, I just wondered if they were just looking for a way to, call back some money that, because the whole thing is about, there's not enough cuts, right? That's what a lot of people are pushing at. And maybe they're looking at this as a way to boost revenue, because we know, the Trump tax cuts are, that's the basis of this whole bill. And yet, we have this giant debt spiral that we're going into. So all I can think of is they looked at this as a way to potentially add to the coffers a little bit. And as you've talked about a lot, Brian, and everybody has seen, it's just like gambling's just the easiest thing to target, because if you're not a gambler, you don't care, right? It doesn't affect me. They're not looking out for the best interests of people who are either pros or recreational. So that's my guess on this front. Because again, this wasn't in the initial bill by the legislature. This came in the Senate. So, the House bill was very different, and it's going back to the House. And whether or not they strip it out or not, it would really seem odd for them to have this be one of the things that they feel like they're going to take a stand against, because this thing is massive. This is just tiny little probably speck in the sand in the grand scheme of things. So we'll see, but you're right. Somebody did it for some reason. My guess is it was an easy way to forecast. Again, it's just a forecast. Oh, we're gonna get an extra $5-10 million or whatever, or $100 million in the next 10 years, whatever it is that we're gonna claw back. And trying to basically have don't they have like bill scores or something that they have on all these things, Brian? I mean, that's all I can imagine why they would do it.
Brian, if you look underneath the initial commentary on this, just to see random people's replies to it, the overwhelming sentiment is good. These degenerates deserve to be taxed.
I mean, there's a lot. There's still a lot of that sentiment. I think we all live in a little bit of a bubble where we all talk to each other, follow each other, listen to a lot of each other's podcasts and stuff. And normal people, they're still you got to imagine that, like, the amount of propaganda pre-2008 anti-gambling propaganda. They wanted people not to bet on these offshore books and go to the casinos. And there was a lot of gambling addiction and propaganda and stuff like that. Not that that's not a real thing. Of course it is. But, so they've been kind of trained to just assume that gambling equals bad. It's the same class as any other sin tax, cigarettes, gambling. Just throw it in that boat and give us the money. Like, this is a lot of people that think that way, unfortunately.
But it does seem like they found this, not necessarily golden goose, but by legalizing gambling, even when you see I guess what the cut Illinois is taking now, or the cut that New York is taking, that this is generating huge money for each of these states. And it seems like they keep going back to the coffer to extract more money out of it because there's really no resistance. The only people who care are the people who are doing it. It's such a small percentage of the people. And when it's thrown into a bill like this is probably the least concerning thing in the bill to 99.99% of people.
Yeah, I'd like to hear Dan's thought on this as well. Is if I'm DraftKings, or even just looking at DraftKings from a top level, the failure of their lobbying efforts and the money they've spent over the last decade plus, back when Dan was protesting on the streets, right?
I did.
I know, yeah, and then all those efforts, where have they've just gotten pounded in the last 6 months, loss after loss. It doesn't seem like they're doing anything. Underdog, that was the only company I saw that filed a lawsuit. Where's DraftKings on this? I don't know. It just seems like a huge failure from their government relations department. And people should be, I don't want anyone to lose their job, but like, they should at least look at who's running the show there, because that is a big failure.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, the underdog lawsuit you're talking about is California. And, the thing that with California is we still don't know what this AG opinion is going to be, right? Like, there's a big difference between saying any and all fantasy sports are, illegal now moving forward, or review it as, against the law. That's the opinion that we give. And then it's another thing to say that, only this pick'em style that underdogs and prize picks like to offer, we view that as illegal. We don't know what this opinion is going to say, but we do know in particular that at the very least there is going to be a target on underdog and prize picks, and they're trying to get ahead of it with that lawsuit. And I think it's smart for them to go this route and fight back. We saw the same thing happen in Illinois, saw it happen in Texas, where AGs gave negative opinions about DFS, and DraftKings stood their ground. They said, no, we're going to go to court. We're going to prove that, we're a game of skill. And they never left. FanDuel left a couple, and then they came back, but DraftKings in particular stood their ground and said, we're going to fight this in the courts. And it appears like that underdog is willing to go that route. And I think it's kind of smart too, because there should be a blueprint on what it takes to prove that, because they were, victorious. And, I still think there's a lot of uncertainty on what this AG opinion is going to say, but at the end of the day, there's no doubt in my mind, especially looking at, some of the Twitter posts by, some of the interests in the tribal community, they are specifically, posting memes of Prize Picks and underdogs, on tombstones and stuff. So they're the two that they are really, really focusing after. But I'd be really hard pressed for them to say that, oh, salary cap is okay, but your version is not, especially now that Prize Picks and Underdog have the peer-to-peer version of their pick'em. That changes the calculus a little bit when it's not versus the house. So I think it's really interesting, and time's going to tell on that one. But I think that Underdog's going to put up a fight for sure.
Underdog should be putting up a fight because it's such a big market, especially a market without sports betting too, that it does give you a level playing field. I mean, if you're in California right now, use code Mayo at Underdog, by the way. I'll try to tie in my sponsor with that as well. Smash a like while you're here, sub to Mayo Media Network. But there is zero chance there's going to be nuance, Dan, in this opinion that, oh, it's salary cap versus this. I saw this happen when I lived in Ontario. And the moment sports betting came in, they just called DFS and sports betting the same and taxed them exactly the same. And then DFS couldn't operate anymore in Ontario.
I mean, I tend to agree with you because I think the moment that you try to get nuance with it, I think it opens the door for Underdog and Prize Picks. But like DraftKings and FanDuel are in a really weird spot because obviously right now DFS doesn't drive their business. And at the end of the day, for them to be able to operate regulated gambling in California, it's going to have to be a deal with the tribes. So they don't want to ruffle that feather all that much, where you can even read what Underdog put forward. They said 10% of our revenue comes from California. Poof, that could be gone. That doesn't apply to FanDuel and DraftKings. So I don't know how aggressive they're going to be in fighting this, knowing that in the long term, they need to align themselves more than likely with the tribes because they tried to fight themselves and it was an unmitigated disaster. Spent hundreds of millions of dollars completely wasted on this, bill or on this, amendment for people to vote on. And it got absolutely crushed at the ballot box because the tribes just pummeled that much more money into it to fight against it. So I think it's a really interesting kind of like political spot for FanDuel and DraftKings, but more, I don't want to say startup because Underdog's a huge company. They have just so much more to lose because they're still very dependent right now on, DFS to, carry their business.
I wouldn't be stunned, Brian, that if they can't, let's say they come out against it and as fantasy sports gets banned in California, that means people playing on Yahoo for their season-long regular season league, like somehow that gets put into it and banned as well because the bill just covers everything and there's zero nuance to it.
It wouldn't shock me at all. Like in my experience, like the like level of expertise in any of these domains is really low. And that includes the AGs too. Like I know they're constitutionally elected officers and stuff, and they should have like a higher standard. But they don't know the difference between best ball and Yahoo season long and dailies and anything like that. Like they might have some. They're getting lobbied themselves, from all these various interest groups, and then negotiating some sort of deal from there. But it has very little to do with the AG or the experts, just really going over the law and be like, oh man, does this interpretation from 1987 really mean this here? Like it doesn't happen. And I wanted to say this earlier, and I just in case I don't get it out, I want to point out all these California, the federal big beautiful bill, the Illinois tax, all these things too. None of them help problem gambling that they so are worried about, which gives them the moral claim that they can tax this incessantly, right? So that's the claim, because otherwise, why would they tax this like more than they would a shovel store or a hot dog stand? It's because the evils of problem gambling. But yet, none of these laws are going to help problem gamblers. In fact, they would all probably hurt them much more than help them.
Well, then there would be no oversight. Like Dan, how much do you think that the offshores are looking at this right now and being like, please do this? This would be great.
California, absolutely. They're licking their chops right now for this to happen. And, And because I mean, the one thing you can look at too is, if people like to play on Prize Picks or Underdog as an outlet to get a sweat, those are, even though they're not like quote unquote regulated in the state of California, they're regulated pretty much everywhere else. So those are regulated entities, even if they aren't quote unquote in the state. And to me, it just seems like really weird political hill to die on, Brian, when you've got millions, and this is outside of our bubble, because like we love playing salary cap, but we're the dorks. We're the real minority here of fantasy sports, DFS. The largest growth sector, the largest, probably the biggest company right now in DFS right now is Prize Picks. And the reason that is there are so many casual players on Prize Picks and Underdog right now. And they're going to suddenly try to go to their app, put in their 3-pick pick 'em slip. And they're going to be told, no, you can't do that anymore. And that's going to affect millions of people in the state. And that's a weird, fight to want to pick as a elected official, in my opinion. And I know that, again, special interests are driving this. But at the end of the day, this has already been around for upwards of 10 years. And 2 other AGs have decided not to give an opinion on this. And then suddenly you do, and you want to take away enjoyment for millions of people in a fairly regulated space de facto through these other states that already, allow these games. I just think it's such a foolish thing to be going after, because I still don't think this is like overly competitive with sports betting. And I don't know why the tribes feel like, they need to stop this from happening right now. It just seems odd timing to me.
It's the reasoning sometimes is like childish. Like in the Illinois case where you mentioned DraftKings had the AG ruling before that they fought and stayed in the market. And if you read any of the reporting, like Jeff Edelstein and stuff about what happened behind the scenes here in Illinois, Neil Bloom is a guy who runs Rush Street Gaming and a bunch of casinos and real estate. He's a real powerful guy. I've met him once. He's 86 years old, and he's holding this grudge. Like even spending 10% of your mental bandwidth in your last few years over this when you're a billionaire already makes no sense, Dan. And so, but you mentioned the AG in California. It is a constitutional office. Not all AGs are, I believe. There's probably some who aren't. So he is elected. So he does have to get some votes. But I tweeted out, according to ChatGPT, who knows if that's accurate, I think he got like 600,000 or 700,000 from the various Indian, casinos and poker rooms in the state in his last run. So I mean, he's gotta play the game somehow where he makes them somewhat happy and doesn't piss off millions of voters. So maybe the Prize Picks is the decision, and then you can't do the pick'ems or something. I don't know.
But that goes back to what we just said, though. Like, what's the likelihood we're going to get nuance on from an AG to just do something in that particular vein? I mean, that's where like the unknowns here are fascinating to me, and hopefully comes down to the end and they're like, man, maybe we just shouldn't do this. I doubt that's going to happen. There's no way Underdog was going to be this aggressive, and basically sue the AG before he even put forth the opinion. I mean, that's a route that not even DraftKings went when this was happening, in 2015-16 time. So, but this is clearly, a massive issue for these companies. And, it's, if I'm a betting man, which I am, I think it's going to be locked up in the courts for a while. That's what we saw happen in New York. We saw it happen all over the place. And hopefully within that time, then we can get some sort of real legislation around fantasy sports, because that ultimately, I think, is going to be the path here to making this happen. So get it in the courts. We know that process takes a while, and during that time, come up and say, hey, we saw it work other places. We saw it happen in New York alone. Hey, millions of people like to play this. This is going to go away unless you vote for this. So that's what I suspect could be happening out there, but still a long way to go.
It's been a while now, so there's probably a lot of people who are watching this or listening to this, Dan, that don't remember what happened in New York. Was that the week before the FSGA at the time?
No, it actually happened right. We actually ran a daily fantasy sports conference. We ran
That's
our
what it
own
was,
Roto
yeah.
Grinders conference out there in New York. And then lo and behold, like the day before that was supposed to start, they basically said they have to exit the state. And then we had Jason Robbins came to talk at our conference, and it was funny because it wasn't a whole lot of people. It was maybe a couple hundred people. But the next thing you know, this became a big national story, and we had like CNN and all these people wanting to come and document that interview. But yeah, I mean, it was a very tenuous situation. And, it's funny because I look back and really wonder, like, that was such an important, that changed gaming in the United States, right? FanDuel and DraftKings, if New York did not legalize, FanDuel and DraftKings were not going to be able to survive. And guess what? They did. That happened. And the next thing you know, these two are, multi-$100 billion companies, the leaders in gaming in the US and arguably the world in, FanDuel's case. And who knows what would have happened if that didn't take place. Maybe FanDuel and DraftKings aren't the winners right now. Maybe it's a BetMGM or a Caesars. So, that was just a huge moment in gaming in the United States that, it came down to the very last second for New York to say, hey, we're going to legalize DFS. If that doesn't happen, those companies might not exist today.
How long was it out in New York for? I don't even remember now.
It was out for, I think, about 2 or 3 months.
It never missed football, did it?
I don't think so. I think they came towards the end of football season. I don't know. Pat, I'm old, man. I can't remember this stuff anymore.
It's funny because you were young when I met you, and so was I. Now I'm old, so that qualifies you as being old too.
What if you just drafted the best ball Millie Maker winner in California, and then they ban best ball and they get rid of your team and they just cost you $2 million?
Well, how would that even work? Yeah. Because people have been drafting these teams.
Who knows? They don't think about this stuff. Pat. No. They don't know anything.
Well, what do you think about the idea of maybe the lobbyists were caught off guard with the big tax bill on pro gambling and poker, because the lobbyists for some of these larger sports betting companies were probably working with the tribes in California to kick out underdog prize picks and get rid of the pick'em games?
It could, like, they're all playing a dangerous game. I mean, this is when when I was still working for the state here, Jason Robbins came to town, and I was in one of the meetings because I worked for the state and I knew some people with some of the legislators here, and the AG was there, and he was very much of the mindset that DraftKings is a technology company. And I left that meeting going, he's in trouble because he doesn't understand this has nothing to do with like writing some code and making the best product. And you then will get a bunch of customers. You're in a new game when it comes to gambling and syntax, and especially at the state level, it's been regulated and broken up like booze has, in every state. And it's very hard to get in there. So it's very impressive that they actually pulled this off at all.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the reckoning was always around the corner.
I mean, honestly, one of the Brian, you know how hard it is to get bills passed. What DFS did for that 2-year period is arguably one of the most, I would say, people who are in politics would say they would have never suspected that to be able to happen, to be able to get that many bills passed in that many states. And, you can say, like, yeah, these, maybe these lobbying groups didn't do a particularly great job since sports betting has been legal. Well, guess what? They also allowed these two companies to become the industry leaders by winning and getting DFS regulated in all these different markets, because that's the reason why they're number one. I mean, they spent, gobs of money. People became comfortable with them to be able to like put their money online with them. I mean, MGM and Caesars and many of these other companies have been around for years and years and years, and they just thought at the end of the day, FanDuel and DraftKings, they're not that big. And then for these two companies to come in and just dominate and have 70% of the market, like they never thought in their wildest dreams that was going to happen, because that's really never happened in any other gambling market, right? If you go over to Europe, there's tons of different books, and they're all at 10-15%. Here in the United States, it's really been two giant winners, and the reason that happened is because those lobbyists were really, really good at their job at that period of time. So maybe it hasn't been great after the fact, but they wouldn't have gotten to this point if those guys did not achieve what they did. And I tell you right now, that was absolutely unbelievable to be able to accomplish what they did during that time.
Well, you must have seen this a bunch, Brian, depending on what the industry was, that you have these, as Dan kind of pointed out, these underdog companies who then very quickly become the establishment and the leaders. And then their whole idea of what they were fighting for in the first place completely goes 180.
Yeah, it's strange, which is what I was kind of saying. Maybe they're playing this game a little too much, and getting involved where they shouldn't. They did have the carve out, Dan, right? Where the federal level UIGEA carve out, which started all this, that made DFS, legal before the state. So that was a nice little disruptive advantage in getting into these super entrenched industries. But nonetheless, a huge accomplishment by all of them. And honestly, they proved me wrong by after that meeting. They had so much success. I think this maybe some of this is just as simple as that, they're like, well, let's just let them get in, and then we're going to tax the shit out of them later on, and this was, it's not like really spoken out loud, but everyone kind of assumed that this was always going to happen. And it's really, I mean, it's just ridiculous, because like the budget wise, are some of these bills, are they even going to gain net dollars versus not having these changes? You could argue that the offshoring of some of these players, the recreational players who won't play because, like, why am I going to have to pay $1 on a $10 scratch off ticket if I break even? I don't even want to do this anymore. Are they even going to generate revenue? Which is a big talking point of why they would do this. Problem gambling and revenue generation, right? And do they accomplish either of these things? Do they lower problem gambling? No, I would say most reasonable people would say no, they don't. Are they going to generate money? The Illinois one probably will, but it's like in a very regressive way, where you're still going to be losing dollars that you otherwise wouldn't have. And so their estimates of how much they're going to collect, they're always wrong on them anyways, but I think it's going to be more wrong because, of course, they don't know what they're doing.
But it's got to be, I mean, the Illinois one is crazy, though, because if there's a lot of people who only bet, $1, $2, and do these, 30 leg parlays, you're going to bet $1 and then have a 50-cent surcharge on top of your dollar. Like, no way. Like, that really crushes the little player in Illinois. The people who are betting to $1,000 a game, $5,000, this is nothing. Does not matter to them, does not move the needle whatsoever. But this really punishes the little guy, which is unusual because normally you don't do things to punish the little guy in this sort of situation. But in Illinois, they did. But that's also a unique situation. And I think you framed it really well. And that article that I think Edelstein wrote for In-Game really laid it out about how this appeared to be more of a grudge than anything. And but man, that was just really, really surprising that Illinois went that route. Not really, because it's Illinois and I lived there for 18 years. I know how corrupt that state is, and how poor they are in terms of like the coffers and how much upside down they are with all their revenue. So I'm not surprised by it, but at the end of the day, man, let's hope that doesn't happen elsewhere, because that's really bad policy.
Request for anyone who's watching this live, head on over to X at the PME. Share this around. Smash a like while you're here and sub on YouTube. You can always catch it after the fact on the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast on Spotify and Apple. A lot of what I saw, Brian, about even the casual players. So if it still remains like a business write-off for a professional, that's one thing. Deducting your gambling losses from your salary as a casual player is another thing who this would affect the most with the overall big bill. How many people are actually doing that, do you think? Like just like some 22-year-old, are they actually claiming their gambling losses on their taxes?
That's just what I was kind of alluding to with the budget and how much dollars they're going to get. It's like how many recreational people are actually going to claim anything under 1,000 jackpot that they hit for or more. Even then it's probably 20-30%. I mean, it's not nothing, I suppose. I mean, like in my head I picture it like the All In podcast guys, right? Like Chamath and whatever. Like I could see them having to pay an extra, a couple million a year, I suppose. And for real life if this does get passed for in DFS is qualified, all these things are question marks. There are pros who don't register as a pro, like
Right.
Shady Advice is a guy who we work with, talk with, and comes on the pod and stuff. And he's a teacher, at a college. So I doubt he even registers as a pro, even though he could. And so like now to see what does he have to do? Like if you're in Illinois, do I have to count the 50 cents per bet I have to add now as part of my net losses? Like who's doing this math? Dan mentioned this earlier too. If they can get a lot of chatter when you open up your Underdog app and it doesn't work in California, imagine open up your DraftKings app to make your $1.50 parlay and they're like, oh, and a 50-cent surcharge. If you don't like this, press this button to send a message to your local legislature. Like they're gonna get a ton here too.
I've learned from you over the years that sending these letters to legislators does do nothing.
It's not here. Well, I mean, I would imagine like even the percentage that get read is very low. I'm hanging out with some legislators over the weekend, so I'm going to talk about this and try to figure out as much as I can and what they think it affects. I tweeted this out. I think, as the kids say, chimping out on Twitter is more effective than calling your local legislators. Call your local legislator, though. Don't
Doesn't hurt.
If you're going to call your local legislator, I would call your local office, not your state capital. This is my experience when I was working there. Your local person is usually going to be more helpful than the person who works in the capital. So here it's in Springfield. They live in Springfield. They don't really have an association with your districts oftentimes. So make sure you get the actual local person, not the state office, not the capital office, and you might get a little bit more help. It depends on the legislator, but also it's because it's so, I mean, gambling turns top heavy, right? Where the leadership has so much power, especially in Illinois, but I'm sure it works like this in other areas, that if you have a freshman representative and you call him, he might be like, hey, yeah, that's awful. I'll see what I can do. He just doesn't have any influence. He doesn't have any power. He's going to get his campaign money from leadership, from the party, which the Senate president and the speaker, depending on your area, they're the ones doling out this dough, generally speaking, or run the party apparatus. And so like they can't really say no. They don't really have a choice, even though that sounds awful. It is what it is. So I mean, I shouldn't try to dissuade people. I'm more just saying that on the show because it's the way I see it, and that's how I saw it when I was there. But yeah, sure, call your local rep as well as chimping out on Twitter, as I would add.
I mean, I can definitively say though, like with New York, again, this is 10 years ago or whatnot, it actually did work. It actually did have an effect to get that across the finish line. I think on a national level, like what we're talking about in the big, beautiful bill, good luck. Like, never hurts to try, but good luck. But I think if it comes down to, say, California example, if they say fantasy's gone, I think if millions of people are hitting their legislator up with the same message, that it's bad. We want this back. I do think you can have a larger effect there on like a state local level than you're going to have on a national level, because I've seen it work. I've absolutely seen it work, and especially in a state like California where it's been around for a while. That was the big reason why it worked so well in New York, was people had been playing FanDuel and DraftKings for so long, and then it was taken away from them. So if that happens in California, I wouldn't put it past that having, you know, an effect of, you know, getting something potentially done in terms of, you know, legalizing and defining what fantasy sports is.
Brian, I might just be old, but what is chipping out?
Yeah, you are old, and I am even older. Chipping out is like where you go on Twitter and just tweet incessantly about the issue and start tagging legislators, and you tag JD Vance for some reason. You're just going crazy. You're chimping out. You're really against whatever the thing is. And I don't know. The kids seem to think that's what's been working at the federal level. And I mean, like what Dan was saying, like, good luck. Like, I doubt your senator is going to read your email at the federal level, but, you know, do it. Go ahead. It doesn't cost you anything. Doesn't hurt. So go ahead and do it, but also chimp out a little bit. Chimp out on Twitter a little bit.
So let's live in a world where I don't think this is going to happen. I actually think everything will be okay in California. And if something does come through, that underdog will be able to stay there and fantasy sports will be able to stay there. They'll get that worked out because, as Dan mentioned, it's been there for so long that there should be enough grassroots support to push it back the other way. But let's say, you know, the worst we think of this bill as it pertains to taxing people goes through and fantasy sports gets banned in California. I had made mention of the offshores kind of licking their lips about this before. That'd be one thing, but to tie it back into something that's been going on right now, and this, it's such a weird topic, but Dan, the Malik Beasley thing where he got caught betting on the NBA, we've seen this happen in the NBA a bunch already. That, I mean, if it's true, then death penalty for him, never allowed to play basketball again professionally. I think that needs to be the punishment for something like this, just to ensure that people do not bet on these games, even if he's betting overs on himself in these games, which I actually think is better than people betting unders on themselves. But that's me. But if we get rid of the legal ways, or at least regulated ways, where you can wager on things and it does push people offshore, this stuff just doesn't get caught, does it?
I mean, it's got caught in the past. I mean, there was plenty of, you know, point shaving situations at Arizona State and other times that it, you know, people have gotten caught, and most of that was identified via Vegas. You know, there's no question in my eyes that the proliferation of regulated gambling has certainly made this more accessible and way worse. Some of the situations that have sprouted up with Jonte Porter or potentially Malik Beasley, and we've seen it with some college players. So yes, they're identifying it, but it's also so much more convenient for people to bet than it ever was. Jonte Porter, could he potentially have done that with an offshore? Absolutely could have. But most of these guys, like I saw, like Malik Beasley, like follows FanDuel on Instagram. I think I saw somewhere. Like these brands are just so much in everybody's face. Where, you know, the offshores were around, but they weren't nearly marketing to the level that we see a lot of the sports books do today. There's no question, though, that, you know, a lot of this stuff is being found, you know, through the means of the regulated platform. But my one curiosity is, if they're looking to Malik Beasley, and this happened like over a year ago, what took so long? Why is it only coming out now? Like, why are they only doing an investigation now if this happened a year ago? I'd love to know, like, why the delay in this, and what had changed from then to now that suddenly decided to have, you know, the attorney general or whomever start investigating this. I think this story is a fascinating one to see what's going to happen, especially because this is the complete opposite of Jonte Porter. Porter, two-way player, didn't make much money. I get it. Malik Beasley has had $60 million in salary in the NBA and was about to sign another $40 million deal this offseason. It's a lot of money to be spending if he's that far in debt from gambling. So I don't know. This is a fascinating one, and one that surprises me infinitely more than what we saw with Jonte Porter.
Brian, do you think that it takes so long to do some of these things just because of the process of actually getting it to the AG, having it come across the desk, actually doing something about it? And do you think that there is more of this going on right now than ever? Or I fall into the camp that there's probably less of it, just people are getting caught now. Like we just didn't hear about it.
Wow, yeah. Well, like the slowness, I've seen people sleeping at their desk and stuff like when I was working. So I'm sure it could get pretty slow there. My mind goes like conspiratorial on this stuff, like that it's being, an unspoken, let's get some cases, high profile cases, and then this legislation doesn't seem so bad if we're going to pass something. I know it sounds crazy. Maybe I am crazy.
Oh, hey, at the time, I thought that the NBA paid Jonte Porter to make these bets so they could make an example of him for the other players, and that's where he would make all of his money in his career. Like, hey, you're banned for life. Here's $30 million.
You're right. Yeah, and he'd take that in a heartbeat, you'd think. So maybe not. I mean, and you see in the New Jersey legislation we touched on briefly, they have criminal penalties for syndicates. That's something people haven't talked about. That's pretty big. I mean, if you get inside info on Beasley, taking a prop dive or something, you're going to have a syndicate to make any significant amount of money to wet Beasley's whistle when he's making 60 plus 40 theoretically. That's a lot of money to waste. Never underestimate stupidity. Maybe he's just.
Yeah. Like, how much does that factor into this that we're not even thinking about? Just maybe he's kind of a moron.
I would say in Beasley's case, it's like 50-50, right? Like, he dropped in the draft because of that, I think, right? Back in the day. I mean, I played Beasley so much in DFS. I can't see how you could prove that man is cheating. It's like, you have no idea what this guy's going to do on any night. So like, I don't know, good luck proving this one.
But there's got to be a trail, right? I mean, there's got to be something. I mean, that was what with the Jonte Porter thing was just so crystal clear when you saw like these what were they, 5K parlays on unders for this guy who plays like 6 minutes a game. Like that was just like completely and utterly obvious that there was something going on. We haven't seen a lick of evidence or data or anything around this yet. It just kind of leaked out that they're looking into it. But, again, they also were looking into Terry Rozier. Didn't that one come out not that long ago too? And nothing further happened with that. So, if I'm Malik Beasley, I'm a little surprised he hasn't come out and tried to clear his name a little bit if he didn't do anything. That would be like the first thing I would do if this was completely fabricated and I had nothing to do with it. Why wouldn't you come out and say, like, I'm not involved in this? And as far as I know, has he even said anything?
File a tampering case against the NBA or something because he's got a contract coming up. Trying to make yourself look good. Nothing.
Yeah, even with the FBI finished their Rozier investigation, nothing came out, which was conveniently done at exactly the same time that the Beasley news actually dropped. Maybe they can only work on one case at a time. But you have to think it hurt Rozier in terms of his market. And it seems to be quite detrimental to someone's reputation. Like, people believe that Terry Rozier bet on himself or against himself in games because they heard that all they read was that headline. Like, it's very damaging to put this stuff out if it's not true.
100%. And Rozier was just trying to impress a girl, right? Like, isn't this like how the FBI gets like half of their criminals, right? It's like some guy who's trying to impress somebody, like, oh yeah, I could do that. I can blow up that building if I wanted to. Yeah, I'm a tough guy. All right, under arrest, sir. Rozier just trying to impress some lady, ruins his completely ruins his reputation.
It just, there seems to be no financial incentive for these guys to do it. But then if you do it offshore and you don't do it through a regulated book day, and you end up like Ohtani, and then you can just blame it on whoever you want.
Yeah,
That's true. And Matt actually put up a question in chat. Will books use these examples as a reason to eliminate under betting on props? And that was when the Porter thing came out. Like, that was the route that I thought we could potentially be heading towards. Our one-sided markets, which as a sports bettor, that's terrible. You definitely don't want to see that. And I wouldn't be shocked if down the road, if we see a bunch more of these cases, and let's face it, if they happen, it's going to be around prop betting. I don't think it's going to be around, more than likely, game lines, game totals. Maybe they are. I could be wrong on that, but it just seems like, a player to be able to dictate an outcome, it's so much easier with prop bets. And, maybe Brian and I can't get down as much on prop bets, but your average person can still get a lot of money down on prop bets. So I hope that doesn't happen, but I would say it's not a non-zero chance that could, be a possibility down the road.
Brian, what percentage of the average bettor do you thinks already that the betting the under on something doesn't exist?
Well, they never bet it. So
no, that's what I mean. Like, if you got rid of it, would they care? They're only betting overs anyway.
Was that ever there? Funny enough, in the in Illinois legislation, I don't know if they've changed this, but when I read it, they were required to have two-way lines on all lines. So even so they've already in Illinois been illegal, and the AG's never done anything about it, unless they've changed it. That was however many years ago. They got it changed. So yeah, I mean it's it's a little known fact. They can kind of do whatever they want. We have these checks and balances and all this stuff, but if they don't enforce the legislation, what are you gonna do about it?
It would be bad news for me because I've been cleaning up on underdog WNBA unders, Dan. And if they got rid of that market, I wouldn't know what to do with myself. That's the
well, hammer it while you can.
Yeah, just you get all in code Mayo and underdog, by the way.
Yeah, I mean,
it's up to $1,000. Why wouldn't you?
Those NBA teams worth $500 million. How about that?
Wait, who's worth $500 million?
You didn't see that tweet? Yeah, they're the Papagliano brother, the one who does sports, tweeted out that the highest ranked team is worth $500 million, then $450 for the next.
In the WNBA.
That's what he says.
Like, isn't the only team that's worth anything Caitlin Clark's team? Because she's on it.
And that one's not even a high one.
That blows my mind. I guess the New York teams that have been around. But is this any different than being like, hey, those live teams are worth $1.1 billion? It's like, okay.
Well, the expansion cost was like $250 million, I think, and they just added 3 teams. So I'm guessing that's where that kind of valuation came from, to say, okay, if they're going to pay $250 to join the league on top of everything else, I think honestly, this Caitlin Clark thing is insane. I mean, how much money she is bringing to the table and how much viewership she's bringing to the table. And it's real. I mean, I never cared about WNBA before she was in it. And now they're expanding the league. I mean, talk about like the most underpaid person in the history of sports. You can probably make the argument that it's Caitlin Clark. I think I saw she makes like $78,000 a year. It's crazy.
Brian, I brought this up on Tuesday's show. If people are looking for something to binge over the holiday, it's like a 2-hour show, evergreen topics, a lot of fun. But Caitlin Clark's essentially Tiger without being as good as Tiger.
I'm an Angel Reese fan, so no, I'm kidding. She is really good. And then that Pompliano tweet thread that I mentioned about the team values, just a lot of people hating on her, like, oh, she's having a down year, she's not very good. It's like, okay, fellas.
Yeah, I think it, regardless of like how good or bad she is, like Tiger was one of the best players ever. Yeah, from the moment that he stepped on, but he was the needle mover. She's just the needle mover. And all sports do is try to find the one needle mover and then blow that out to as much as possible, make as much money as possible. But it feels like they're doing the opposite. Well,
it's a rare situation where the league hates the one person that's driving it the most, right? like outside of her teammates, it doesn't seem like the rest of the league cares for Caitlin Clark. Not because she's an evil person. It's almost just because there's like a jealousy towards her that she gets all the attention. And in golf, that was never the case, Pat. People, would look at Tiger Woods, and at the end of the day, we're like, you know what? He's getting more money for all of us. And maybe when it's an individual sport, it's easier to do. But even with like Jordan in his prime, he was another one that kind of raised that the league to the next level. Nobody was sitting there like, saying how bad of a person Michael Jordan was. I mean, yeah, there was some gambling rumors that came out with him, but at the end of the day, people like respected him, and it's insane to me there doesn't seem to be any level of respect for Caitlin Clark, and she is the one that is driving this league right now, and it's shocking to see because you normally, when somebody is putting more money in your pocket, you usually want to like show a little bit of respect, and I don't think we've seen that whatsoever in the WNBA.
It's weird, Brian, because it's like, hey, I can go and smack Caitlin Clark in the back of the head from behind, and then I'll be happy to go have to play in Russia to make money.
Right.
It's like for the options that you have.
Right. Yeah. Yes, she should strike a one woman strike. See what they do.
We've already seen the games that she's out. The ratings like crater across the league. They crater, not just her games.
She's a phenomenon. I mean, what can I say? I mean, it still doesn't move the needle for me. I have to say.
Listen, I'm betting on it now. That's step one, right?
Yeah, it's and that's fine if you do. I just haven't been able to sit down and I mean the NBA in general for me is really not as appealing as it used to be. So WNBA is not making the cut for me.
Well, I mean, WNBA, it's the calendar, though, right? Like, there's nothing else to bet on, right? It's if you're not a baseball guy or you just get burned out of baseball, what else is there besides golf, which Pat and I love? But again, that's not every day. Like, we got to wait till Thursday for that to get started. So I just think it was like the proliferation of gambling. And then, I think her and Angel Reese coming into, I mean, people like to crap on Angel Reese, but she is a big part of like this whole narrative about WNBA because there is this rivalry between them. And I love it. Like I there's no doubt Clark is the one driving it, but you're wrong if you think that Angel Reese and her standing and everything that happened in the college basketball final where she was, showing her ring off or whatnot, all that has played into this. And it's just great timing for the WNBA.
And it does seem that like the Caitlin Clark generation with Reese and the people that have come in since and are going to come into the league, it seems to be the older players that have the real problem with Clark. Like a rivalry is a good thing for a sport. Like amping that up is awesome. Pick this side, pick that side against two peers going at it one another. It's the older players who hate it. And that's what made me think about Tiger in the first place, that when Tiger first came onto the scene, despite the fact that, when you win the St. Jude Classic that Tigers play the year before Tiger gets there, it's $600,000 in the prize pool. And the 2 years later, when Tiger's playing in the tournament, all of a sudden it's a $5 million prize pool. The players love that, but it was the old guys that were aging out of the PGA Tour, be like, fuck this guy. But all the young guys were like, this is great. I'm a millionaire now.
Did you guys see the Angel Reese bros who are doing the first missed shot? That they bet on her first missed shot every game, and they do a reaction video and post it on social media. I see it on Twitter. It's pretty funny. Then she misses the first shot quite a bit. So if those guys start getting affected by this regulation and taxes, I mean, it's all over for all of us.
Could you do? I wonder if you could do like the what is like? I mean, I don't watch. That's a weird thing. That it's the one great thing about some of these optimizers and projection systems, Brian, that it's probably getting harder to do because more people are paying attention. But I've always found that like I've been on WNBA for a while now, like over the past few years, and it's been a real cash cow versus the other sports.
Yeah, you have less pros playing. That's always the big when you have less pros playing. The smaller sites were always pretty juicy too until they got too many pros on them. Always a good angle in any of these peer-to-peer games of skill. Anytime you can get a new or there's not a whole bunch of pros dedicating a lot of time to it, it might be a good place to look.
Well, if you guys are looking for a place to play poker that is not filled with pros, because I will be playing in it. If you're in Canada outside of Ontario, COOLBET.com has the Pat Mayo Experience Open Qualifier to a tournament in Tallinn, Estonia, happening Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. It's 20 euro to join, which is like $25 American, 30 Canadian, whatever it might be. Come join us in there. Just go underneath the poker tab and under tournaments, search Pat Mayo, and my tournament will pop up, and you got a bounty on my head. Brett, can you tell some of your Canadian friends to go play in this for me?
Oh God. Let's see. Do I have any?
Besides me, your
I
one
mean,
Canadian friend, apparently.
I guess I'll DM Tambo. I could maybe he can if he's not in it already. Okay, really quick, that just reminds me though, like all this started years ago with trying to legalize poker online in America, right? Before DFS, and it's the least legal of all of
I
these
know.
sports, which is just makes no sense and is further proof that these people don't know what they're doing or what they're talking about or anything about this issue that they oversee and how much money that could generate. And it's just so frustrating.
And you know what's crazy about that? I was just in Vegas and I was staying at Paris, which is right near the Horseshoe. The World Series of Poker is as popular as it's ever been. Imagine how big it would be if there was actually regulated online poker, in the majority of markets in the United States. So it's continued to thrive, the live poker and the World Series of Poker, despite it not being legal in the majority of this country. It's kind of mind blowing, and I'd love to like go back and if that day didn't happen, does DFS ever happen? Probably not. If that day doesn't happen, like how big is the World Series of Poker right now? It's yeah. Looking back at history, there's a ton of things we can look back at, but from a gambling perspective, like that domino was just so massive. And you're right. Like I loved it, and it was just the perfect thing because you could be high stakes, you could be low stakes. Now, obviously there were issues with, the software and everything else, but one day it would be amazing to bring poker back. Love it. Would be amazing.
How does poker work now, Brian? Is it there like agreements between states that you could have? Like I was reading, I think that's what happens in Canada now. That or in some like could you like Jersey, Michigan, and somewhere else are like in their own
Delaware,
Pennsylvania, I think now
I
maybe.
think they're all in. Yeah, but I mean, there's only like Dan 5 states.
Yeah, 5, 6 pooled liquidity. It's not great to say the very least.
Is that why the WSOP is now like still as popular as ever? Because people want to play, but the only place they can go play is Vegas for big.
I honestly don't have a really good answer for it because, like, do they even broadcast the World Series of Poker anymore? Like, that was always the big deal. Was that I get to be on TV? They got all the cameras, and that was a huge draw to like get people in. I honestly don't have a great answer as to why it's the main event is grown at the level that it has. I wish I had an answer to it, but I don't. And maybe that's it. Maybe this is instead of playing every single day, they save their money, they save their 10K, and they come to Vegas to take their shot in the main. Maybe that's it, but it's surprising to me. I wouldn't have expected it with less poker on TV and less online play available.
Whatever happened, Brian, to the two guys that dumped the chips to each other for the bracelet?
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Yeah, whether they got banned entirely, I don't know if that's public yet, but they did take the bracelet from both of them and made them split the winnings. I don't know what the company that had the 1 million bounty. I don't know how that. I'm pretty sure they said they were paying it out, but I could be wrong, Dan, if you know more than me.
Yeah, I don't. I hadn't heard how that finished out, but it's amazing that it took that long for us to have this sort of giant poker World Series of Poker quote unquote scandal happening, but it's here.
But it only was made a scandal because of that alternate payout, right, Brian?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's Doyle Brunson said, you can't stop two guys from going into the bathroom and saying that they're going to split the prize pool.
Right.
And so most poker tournaments do not have that rule anymore. Some of them used to have it where they tried to stop the players from making deals at the final table, and it's just unenforceable. And then you add in this $1 million bounty, and the chip lead was so massive that it just looked really, really bad. Most likely was them colluding to split the $1 million prize pool. But we talked about it for quite a bit on Lulz. So like all my thoughts are there. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. So
yeah,
they lose their bracelet. If they get the money, whatever.
I just got an email. This is always fun. I'm sure that you guys, and Dan, you especially, have encountered this over years because I think that you've probably done some ad sales work too. But I just got an email about advertising on my podcast from a new golf podcast that is starting up. Probably don't want to advertise that.
Hey, you got to take your shots, Pat, right? Like the worst you can say is no.
I guess so. Should I be taking this, Brian?
I don't know.
I'm not gonna tell you how to run your business, my man. Sometimes a few bucks, might be worth it, but up to you, man.
Yeah, if you love this golf podcast, let me tell you about this one that's a lot better. Anyway, thanks for doing this, guys. Very impromptu, and I just wanted to learn more about this because weirdly, as I was telling Brian, it doesn't affect me really at all. It'll affect the ecosystem overall, and I think where I've come down, you guys have alleviated some of my concerns. I'm weirdly more concerned about the California fantasy ban, it would seem, Dan, rather than this overall tax bill at the moment.
That's where I would be. And again, I'm not overly worried about California yet, because again, I still think it's going to end up in the courts. But I tend to agree with that take, that I would be a little bit more worried on California. But it's been a while since we've had to deal with this. It sucks that it's such a huge state, and Underdog and Prize Picks are such massive platforms that have a ton of people who play on them. But that at the end of the day could be the reason why they can overcome this, just because, like you say, grassroots sometimes can really work in these situations. And it's still early to know exactly what that's going to amount to, but at least there's a lot of people in that state who enjoy playing these games, and hopefully they can have their voice heard if they need to.
And Brian, with Underdog specifically, just the bounty of different types of games that they offer versus all of these other companies, that it would just suck, because there really is something on Underdog for any style of daily fantasy that you want to play.
And I wish I could have like a brighter note here on the end, but that is clearly an issue that hopefully it works out for everyone in California. But my main concern is kind of this overarching issue that I've briefly mentioned on lulls every now and again, because it feels like it is a directed effort by, and a lot of times it's not, guys in smoke-filled rooms. It's just people looking at legislation from other states and going, oh, can we do this here? And at the federal level, and you just look at the amount of legislation and gambling probes and anti-gambling articles, and it's just ramping and ramping up. Is like, are we? My major fear is that this turns into a completely captured rent-seeking industry where there's like 3 companies. You can't ever win at it. It's just a little tax haven to fill the budget holes at the state levels, like a lottery. And, our little corner of the world is gone, and so that's I really hope we just, push back at every angle, and then that world never occurs. But to me, it looks like there's it's not a concerted effort, because I don't think they're in a smoke-filled room, like I said, but a seemingly concerted effort where the states are doing a full court press, trying to get as many tax dollars as they can. And they haven't even started on the anti-gambling, gambling addiction stuff yet. So like that's probably around the corner, would be my guess, is there'll be some sort of big story of some idiot always screws it up for the rest of us, and will blow the kids' college fund, and some reason the news picks it up and makes it a huge story. And then after they get all this tax stuff settled, they'll start going again. But this time they're trying to protect us.
I've heard you beat on this for a while about the problem gambling stuff. That like you're not. It's not that. I mean, obviously you believe that problem gambling exists, but is it just you don't like that they're using this as a crutch to do whatever they want? Is that really the gist of it?
Well, yeah, I don't like that our world, our like corner of the internet, that guys don't like is around, like, everyone do whatever they want. But they don't see the political realm for what it is, which is just another game. It's not this thing you were taught in 8th grade of checks and balances and stuff. It's a game. So any ideology that you have, it's either going to be used for for their benefit, or the hand wave it away. It's not. There isn't some moral claim that's going to change the way the game is played. Like the analogy I always give is like, it's like announcing you're not going to bluff when you play poker and write books about, like how wrong it is to bluff and like it's immoral and stuff. And then you sit down at the poker table and lose every time. Right. It's like, this is okay. We're playing a game. And if all we talk about the people who should be advocating on gamblers and bettors the most, and a big part of our stuff is protecting people who have gambling addiction, and like we want that in there, you're not playing the game right. As crazy, as sick as that sounds, because we all don't want people that have problem gambling to get addicted to these things. But like, that's not the game you're playing. You're playing this Game of Thrones at the state level against people who have a lot of wealth, power, and influence, and have been there lobbying and have relationships with these people. They know them. They'll play the long game like they did in Illinois with this 50-cent tax, and just debating over whether problem gambling is 1% or 1.8% of the population, and what we should do about it as gamblers. Professional gamblers is not a good strategy for achieving long-term goals for gamblers, in my opinion.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's sick, that's the world we live in, but it's true. It's a game, and your ideology, they don't care. It's just something that can be useful or hurtful, and so like that's the game. So like, I think we should all just focus on like, okay, how does this affect gamblers? Is it bad? Let's oppose it. Do we message the legislators? Do we call them? Do we email them? Do we chimp out on Twitter? Do we do all the above? Yes. And debating and like, it's not to say we shouldn't like talk about problem gambling either, but that's with like friends and family, right? That's not with this game that's played at the Capitol building. It's with your friends and family. That's when you have those type of conversations. If you want to win. If you don't want to win, then, you'll look like the most compassionate person in gambling Twitter, right? By making everyone go like, I can't believe you would give out a free bet. There's problem gamblers out there.
Could you make that a shtick for yourself?
There's people who do it. Like, seriously, like Malik will put out like,
it's probably Davis. It's probably a Davis burner account. He's trying to both sides this.
That's how he gets all those likes on him making an eagle.
I'm guessing that you and Pete will continue talking about this on LOLs tomorrow.
Yeah, and the way the news cycle works, who knows what's going to happen between 24 hours. So it'll be a whole new show.
So check out the Peter Overzet YouTube channel or subscribe to LOLs on audio feeds if you want to hear Brick and Pete go over what the news is going to be on these subjects 24 hours from now, because a lot will change. So for Brian, for Dan, I'm Pat Mayo, and I will see you next time.